Thomas Alva Edison, arguably the most prolific inventor in American history, fundamentally shaped the modern world with creations like the phonograph, the motion picture camera, and, most famously, a long-lasting, practical incandescent light bulb. His laboratories in Menlo Park and West Orange, New Jersey, were legendary invention factories, producing over 1,000 patents in his name. In his later years, Edison remained an active and revered public figure, though he had scaled back his grueling work schedule. He spent more time at his winter estate in Fort Myers, Florida, often with his close friend, the industrialist Henry Ford. By the late 1920s, his health began to decline due to complications from diabetes. In August of 1931, he collapsed at his New Jersey home, Glenmont, and his condition steadily worsened over the next 2 months. Thomas Edison died at home on October 18, 1931, at the age of 84. His death was treated as a national event. As a tribute, President Herbert Hoover asked Americans to dim their lights for 1 minute on the evening of his funeral, a symbolic gesture honoring the man who had brought light to the world. Edison's funeral was a private service for family and close associates. He was buried behind his beloved home, Glenmont, in the Llewellyn Park neighborhood of West Orange, New Jersey. The home and the surrounding grounds are now a National Historical Park, and his gravesite is a central feature for visitors. He's interred alongside his second wife, Mina Miller Edison, who passed away in 1947. The grave itself is a place of serene simplicity, a stark contrast to the revolutionary nature of his work. A large, simple boulder serves as the primary monument, set in a peaceful wooded lawn. A modest, rectangular bronze plaque is affixed to the boulder, bearing the names and dates of both Thomas and Mina. The site is enclosed by a low hedge, creating a sense of a private garden sanctuary. According to legend, Henry Ford, devastated by his friend's death, asked Edison's son, Charles, to capture his father's final breath in a test tube. The tube was sealed and is now on display at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, a curious and poignant relic of the man whose final resting place remains a humble tribute to a life of extraordinary ingenuity. Nikola Tesla was a Serbian-American inventor and engineer whose work with alternating current AC electrical systems provided the foundation for the modern power grid. A brilliant but eccentric visionary, he made significant contributions to the development of radio, robotics, and wireless communication, often engaging in a famous rivalry with his former employer, Thomas Edison. Despite his genius, Tesla struggled with finances throughout his life, and his more ambitious projects often went unfunded. He spent his final decades living in a series of New York City hotels, growing increasingly isolated and focusing on more unusual theories. He became a fixture in the city, a tall, gaunt figure who would walk to the park every day to feed the pigeons, for whom he held a deep affection. In the winter of 1943, at the age of 86, Nikola Tesla died alone in his room at the Hotel New Yorker. His body was not discovered for 2 days, until a maid entered his room on January 8th, having ignored a "Do Not Disturb" sign he had placed on his door. The medical examiner determined his cause of death to be coronary thrombosis. Immediately following his death, the U.S. government's Office of Alien Property seized all of his belongings and papers, a testament to the perceived importance of his work, particularly during wartime. His funeral was held on January 12, 1943, at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in Manhattan. It was a grand affair attended by over 2,000 people, including Nobel laureates and the mayor of New York City. Afterward, his body was taken to the Ferncliff Cemetery in Ardsley, New York, where it was cremated. His ashes were placed in a metal urn. For several years, the urn was kept in a cemetery vault. In 1952, through the efforts of his nephew, Sava Kosanovich, Tesla's ashes, along with his extensive collection of papers and personal effects, were transported to Belgrade, the capital of what was then Yugoslavia. Today, Nikola Tesla's final resting place is one of the most unique in the world. His ashes are contained within a gold-plated sphere, a shape he considered perfect, which rests on a marble pedestal. This monument is the centerpiece of the Nikola Tesla Museum in Belgrade, where it is on permanent display, surrounded by the incredible inventions that sprang from his visionary mind. Alexander Graham Bell is the Scottish-born inventor and scientist credited with patenting the first practical telephone, a device that revolutionized global communication. His interests were incredibly broad, extending far beyond the telephone to include pioneering work in optical telecommunications, hydrofoils, and aeronautics. A significant portion of his life's work was also dedicated to the education of the deaf, a passion that stemmed from his mother and wife both being deaf. In his later years, Bell spent most of his time at his beloved estate, Bain Braig, which means beautiful mountain in Gaelic, located on Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia, Canada. It was a peaceful retreat where he could escape the pressures of fame and continue his experiments. By 1922, his health was failing due to complications from diabetes. He died at Bain Braig on August 2, 1922, at the age of 75, with his wife Mabel by his side. Upon the news of his death, a remarkable tribute was paid to him. During his funeral service, every telephone on the North American continent was silenced for 1 minute in his honor, a powerful testament to the world-changing impact of his most famous invention. Bell had meticulously planned his own burial. He had a tomb blasted out of the rock at the very top of the mountain on his estate, a place with a commanding view of the surrounding Bras d'Or Lake. His funeral was a simple private service. He was interred in a sealed tomb made of granite quarried from the mountain itself. His coffin, which he had designed himself, was constructed by his laboratory staff from the pine trees that grew on the estate. He was buried alongside his wife, Mabel, who died just a few months after him. The gravesite is marked by a simple, large granite block with a bronze plaque bearing their names and dates. The inscription reads, "Died a citizen of the USA, here, at the home he loved." It remains a private family plot, not open to the public, a secluded and majestic final resting place for the man whose voice was the first to ever be transmitted by wire, now resting in eternal silence atop his beautiful mountain. Johannes Gutenberg was the German inventor and craftsman who introduced printing to Europe with his mechanical movable type printing press. While movable type had been used in Asia, Gutenberg's innovations, which included a new type of press, a hand mold for producing type, and a new oil-based ink, created a complete and practical printing system. His invention, perfected around 1450, made the mass production of books possible for the first time, sparking the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the Age of Enlightenment by democratizing access to knowledge. Despite the world-altering importance of his creation, Gutenberg's own life was not one of great commercial success. He famously lost control of his printing shop and his masterpiece, the Gutenberg Bible, in a lawsuit to his financial backer, Johann Fust. He seems to have continued printing, but he never achieved great wealth and spent his later years in relative obscurity. In his old age, his contributions were recognized by the Archbishop of Mainz, who gave him an official stipend and title, providing for his comfort. Johannes Gutenberg died in his native city of Mainz, Germany, sometime around February 3, 1468. The exact date and cause of his death are not recorded. He was buried in the church of the Franciscan convent in Mainz. The church, however, was heavily damaged and later demolished over the centuries due to wars and sieges. As a result, Gutenberg's grave was lost. Its precise location is unknown today. For a man whose invention ensured that the words and legacies of countless others would be preserved for eternity, it is a profound irony that his own final resting place has vanished from the earth. There is no tomb or headstone to visit. However, his legacy is celebrated throughout Mainz. A large and detailed statue of him stands in the city's central square, named Gutenbergplatz. The Gutenberg Museum, also in Mainz, houses 2 of his original Bibles and stands as the primary monument to his life's work. While his bones are lost, his spirit is embedded in every printed book, newspaper, and document in the world, a legacy far more enduring than any stone monument. James Watt, a Scottish inventor and mechanical engineer, did not invent the steam engine, but his improvements to the existing Newcomen engine were so fundamental that he is credited with creating the first truly efficient and practical steam engine, which became the driving force of the Industrial Revolution. His key innovation, the separate condenser, patented in 1769, dramatically increased fuel efficiency, making steam power an economically viable source for factories, mills, and mines. His later inventions included the concept of horsepower and a device for copying documents. After a long and incredibly successful career as a partner in the firm Boulton and Watt, he retired a wealthy man in 1800. He spent his final years at his home, Heathfield Hall, near Birmingham, England, where he maintained a private workshop in his attic and continued to tinker with various inventions. He remained in good health for most of his retirement. James Watt died at Heathfield Hall on August 25, 1819, at the age of 83. His death was mourned as the passing of a national hero, a man who had transformed the economic landscape of Britain and the world. He was buried in the churchyard of St. Mary's Church in Handsworth, near Birmingham. He was laid to rest alongside his business partner, Matthew Boulton. The original church was later expanded, and by a twist of fate, the new construction was built directly over the site of Watt's grave. As a result, his tomb is now located inside the church itself, in a special chapel dedicated to him, known as the James Watt Memorial Chapel. The centerpiece of the chapel is a magnificent, larger-than-life marble statue of Watt, created by the renowned sculptor Sir Francis Chantrey. The statue depicts a seated Watt, deep in thought, with a set of dividers in his hand. The inscription on the pedestal, written by the celebrated parliamentarian Lord Brougham, is a lengthy and powerful tribute, praising Watt not only for his inventions but also for his profound philosophical mind, concluding that he was one of the most illustrious followers of science and one of the greatest benefactors of the world. It is a grand and fitting monument for the man whose ingenuity truly set the modern world in motion. Orville and Wilbur Wright, two brothers from Dayton, Ohio, were the American aviation pioneers who are credited with inventing, building, and flying the world's first successful motor-operated airplane. Their historic first flight took place at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina on December 17, 1903, a moment that ushered in the age of aviation. Working together in their bicycle shop, they were a perfect partnership of Wilbur's bold vision and Orville's engineering aptitude. Their collaboration was cut tragically short. In the spring of 1912, while on a business trip to Boston, Wilbur contracted typhoid fever. He returned home to Dayton, where his condition worsened. Wilbur Wright died at the family home on May 30, 1912, at the age of 45. His father wrote in his diary, "A short life, full of consequences. An unfailing intellect, imperturbable temper, great self-reliance, and as great modesty." His death was a devastating blow to Orville, who never truly recovered from the loss of his brother and creative partner. Orville lived for another 36 years, becoming the elder statesman of aviation. He served on various aeronautical boards and commissions, but never embarked on another major inventive project without his brother. He died of a heart attack on January 30, 1948, at the age of 76. He had lived long enough to see their simple flying machine evolve into the jet aircraft of the post-World War II era. The two brothers, inseparable in their life's work, are reunited in death. They are buried together in the Wright family plot at Woodland Cemetery and Arboretum in their hometown of Dayton, Ohio. The gravesite is situated on a gentle hill, overlooking the city where they dreamed of flight. The central monument is a tall, elegant gray granite obelisk bearing the surname W-R-I-G-H-T. The individual graves of Wilbur and Orville lie at its base, marked by simple, flat granite stones, flush with the ground. Their stones are inscribed only with their names and dates, reflecting the characteristic modesty they both maintained throughout their lives. The site is a place of pilgrimage for aviation enthusiasts from around the world, a simple and dignified tribute to the two brothers who gave humanity its wings. Henry Ford was the American industrialist who revolutionized both transportation and manufacturing. While he did not invent the automobile, his Ford Motor Company, founded in 1903, perfected the techniques of mass production with the introduction of the moving assembly line. This innovation drastically reduced the cost of his signature car, the Model T, making automobile ownership possible for the average American and fundamentally reshaping the social and economic landscape of the 20th century. Ford became one of the wealthiest and most famous men in the world, known for his business acumen as well as his often controversial social and political views. He remained actively involved in his company for most of his life, though he officially passed the presidency to his grandson, Henry Ford II, in 1945. In his final years, a series of strokes began to affect his mental and physical health. On the evening of April 7, 1947, the local Rouge River flooded, causing a power outage at Fair Lane, Ford's estate in Dearborn, Michigan. In a moment of historical irony, the man who had put the world on wheels and pioneered modern industry spent his final hours in a home lit by candles and oil lamps, the very technologies his work had made obsolete. He died that night from a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 83. His death was front-page news around the world. An estimated 100,000 people filed past his casket during a public viewing at Greenfield Village, his historical park. His funeral was a massive event for the city of Detroit. He was buried in the Ford family plot at the Ford Cemetery, a small and surprisingly modest graveyard on the grounds of St. Martha's Episcopal Church in Detroit. The cemetery is located just a few miles from where he was born and raised. His grave is marked by a large but simple white marble headstone. It is a traditional, upright monument bearing the names of Henry Ford and his wife, Clara, who died in 1950. There is no grand epitaph, no mention of his company or his revolutionary impact on the world. Only his name, a testament to the private, family-oriented side of a man who lived a very public and transformative life. Marie Curie, born Maria Skłodowska in Poland, was a pioneering physicist and chemist who conducted groundbreaking research on radioactivity, a term she herself coined. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, the only person to win the Nobel Prize in 2 different scientific fields, and the first female professor at the University of Paris. Alongside her husband, Pierre, she discovered the elements polonium and radium. Her work not only changed the fundamental understanding of physics, but also led to new medical treatments, including the development of mobile X-ray units, known as petites curies, which she helped deploy on the battlefields of World War I. Throughout her career, Curie worked with highly radioactive materials in rudimentary laboratory conditions with no understanding of the dangers. She routinely carried test tubes of radium in her pockets, which she noted glowed in the dark and was exposed to massive doses of radiation over several decades. This prolonged exposure ultimately destroyed her health. She suffered from chronic illness and near blindness from cataracts. In the summer of 1934, her health declined sharply. She died on July 4, 1934, at a sanatorium in Saint-Célimos, France, at the age of 66. The official cause of death was aplastic anemia, a blood disease that is almost certainly a result of her long-term radiation exposure. Her body was so radioactive that it had to be buried in a coffin lined with nearly an inch of lead. She was initially interred at a cemetery in Sceaux, alongside her husband Pierre, who had died in a street accident in 1906. In 1995, in a ceremony of immense national honor, the remains of both Marie and Pierre Curie were moved to the Pantheon in Paris, France's national mausoleum for its greatest citizens. She was the first woman to be entombed there on her own merits. Her lead-lined coffin was placed in a crypt directly below the Great Dome. Even today, her notebooks, her cookbooks, and her furniture are considered too radioactive to be safely handled without protective clothing. Her body remains a source of dangerous radiation, a silent and powerful testament to the trailblazing scientific discoveries to which she dedicated and ultimately sacrificed her life. Louis Pasteur was a French biologist and chemist whose discoveries were a medical revolution. He is renowned for his breakthroughs in understanding the principles of vaccination, microbial fermentation, and, most famously, pasteurization, the process of heating liquids to kill harmful bacteria. His work confirmed the germ theory of disease, which stated that most diseases are caused by microorganisms, a concept that became the foundation of modern medicine and public health. His creation of the first vaccines for rabies and anthrax saved countless lives and established him as one of the greatest benefactors of humanity. In 1887, the Pasteur Institute was founded in Paris as a center for research, treatment, and teaching, ensuring his work would continue long after him. Pasteur had suffered a severe stroke in 1868 that left him partially paralyzed, but he continued his research for decades. A second stroke in 1894 severely weakened him. He spent his final year in a quiet country home near Saint-Cloud, just outside of Paris. Louis Pasteur died there on September 28, 1895, at the age of 72, while listening to a story about the heroic life of Saint Vincent de Paul. His death was met with international mourning. The French government declared a state funeral, an honor typically reserved for heads of state and military heroes. His funeral procession wound through the streets of Paris, and the service was held at the Cathedral of Notre Dame. Initially, it was proposed that he be buried in the Pantheon, alongside France's most revered figures. However, his family respected his wish to be buried at the Pasteur Institute, the institution that was his life's work. A special crypt was constructed in the basement of the original institute building. The Pasteur family crypt is a spectacular and moving work of art, designed in a grand Byzantine style. The walls and ceiling of the vault are covered in intricate mosaics that depict his major scientific achievements. Chickens and sheep representing his work on vaccines for chicken cholera and anthrax, rabid dogs for his rabies cure, and grapevines for his studies on fermentation. Louis Pasteur's tomb, a massive granite sarcophagus, lies at the center of this magnificent vault, a shrine not only to the man, but to the power of science to heal and improve the human condition. Guglielmo Marconi was an Italian inventor and electrical engineer known for his pioneering work on long-distance radio transmission. Building on the work of others, he developed, demonstrated, and marketed the first successful long-range wireless telegraph system, which became the foundation for modern radio. In 1901, he famously transmitted the first wireless signal across the Atlantic Ocean, from Cornwall, England to Newfoundland, Canada, a feat that catapulted him to international fame. His invention had an immediate and profound impact on maritime safety, and his Marconi Company's equipment played a crucial role in rescue efforts for the Titanic disaster in 1912. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909. In his later years, Marconi became an influential figure in fascist Italy, a staunch supporter of Benito Mussolini, which has complicated his historical legacy. He continued to experiment with shortwave and microwave technology until the end of his life. In July of 1937, while in Rome, he suffered a series of heart attacks. Guglielmo Marconi died in his bed in Rome during the early morning hours of July 20th, 1937, at the age of 63. His death prompted a remarkable and fitting tribute. For 2 minutes, radio stations around the world went silent in his honor. The global communications network that he had created ceased to function for a brief period, a moment of profound quiet to acknowledge the passing of the man who had filled the airwaves with sound. He was given a state funeral by the Italian government. His body was initially interred in Rome. However, it was his wish to be buried in his birthplace. His remains were eventually moved to a grand mausoleum located at the Via Grifone in Pontecchio, near Bologna, his family's estate. It was here, in the attic of this villa, that he had conducted his first successful wireless experiments as a young man. The mausoleum is a monumental structure, designed in a stark, classical style befitting his status in fascist Italy. His large stone sarcophagus lies within, forever connecting the end of his life to the very place where his world-changing journey began. Samuel F.B. Morse was an American painter and inventor who, after establishing a successful career as a portrait artist, shifted his focus to create a revolutionary communication system. He was a co-developer of the Morse code, a system of representing letters and numbers with dots and dashes, and the primary inventor of the single-wire telegraph. After years of struggle to gain support, he finally demonstrated the practical success of his invention on May 24, 1844, by sending the famous message, "What hath God wrought?" from the Supreme Court chamber in Washington, D.C., to his associate in Baltimore, Maryland. The telegraph rapidly spread across the globe, shrinking the world by allowing information to travel almost instantaneously over vast distances. He became a wealthy and famous man, although he was often embroiled in legal battles over his patent claims. In his later years, he was a noted philanthropist, donating to colleges, religious organizations, and other causes. He remained active into his old age, and in 1871, a bronze statue of him was unveiled in New York's Central Park, an event he attended. He died of pneumonia in his home in New York City on April 2, 1872, at the age of 80. His death was a major event, and his funeral was held at the Madison Square Presbyterian Church, with a massive crowd in attendance. He was buried in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York, a sprawling Victorian cemetery famous for its ornate monuments and illustrious residents. Morse's final resting place is one of the cemetery's most prominent. The family plot is located on a high point of land and is marked by a massive and magnificent monument that resembles a small Gothic cathedral. The gray granite structure is tall and ornate, featuring spires, intricate carvings, and a central archway. It is a grand and imposing tomb, designed to reflect the immense status he had achieved in his lifetime. The monument stands as a powerful tribute to the man whose system of dots and dashes became the first language of the electronic age, laying the groundwork for the digitally connected world of today. Alfred Nobel was a Swedish chemist, engineer, and industrialist who amassed a great fortune, primarily from his invention of dynamite in 1867. He held 355 patents in his lifetime, with his most famous invention being a safer and more manageable explosive than nitroglycerin. Dynamite was a dual-use invention. It was immensely useful in construction, mining, and quarrying, but it was also a devastatingly powerful weapon of war. Nobel was a complex and solitary man, often described as a pessimist. He was deeply troubled by the destructive applications of his inventions. A pivotal moment in his life reportedly occurred in 1888, when a French newspaper mistakenly published his obituary after the death of his brother. The obituary condemned him as a merchant of death, famously stating, "Dr. Alfred Nobel, who became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before, died yesterday." This premature condemnation is believed to have profoundly affected Nobel and solidified his desire to leave behind a more positive legacy. He spent the last years of his life drafting his final will, a document that would shock his family and the world. Alfred Nobel died of a stroke at his villa in San Remo, Italy, on December 10, 1896, at the age of 63. When his will was read, it was revealed that he had left the vast majority of his immense fortune in a trust to establish what would become the Nobel Prizes. These annual awards in physics, chemistry, physiology, or medicine, literature, and peace were to be given to those who had conferred the greatest benefit on mankind, regardless of their nationality. His body was returned to his native Sweden. After a funeral service in Stockholm, he was buried in the Nobel family plot at Norra Begravningsplatsen, or the Northern Cemetery in Stockholm. His grave is marked by a large but relatively simple gray granite obelisk. The stone is inscribed with the names of several members of the Nobel family, with his own name, Alfred Nobel, prominently at the center. It is an understated monument for a man of such wealth and influence. Yet his true legacy is not this stone, but the prestigious annual prize that has become the world's most esteemed honor for human achievement. Eli Whitney was an American inventor whose creation of the cotton gin in 1793 revolutionized the economy of the antebellum South. The machine automated the process of separating cotton fibers from their seeds, a task that was previously incredibly labor-intensive. While Whitney had hoped his invention would ease the burden of slave labor, it had the opposite effect. It made upland short-staple cotton a hugely profitable crop, which massively increased the demand for enslaved people to cultivate and harvest it, thereby entrenching the institution of slavery in the American South. Due to patent law issues and widespread piracy of his design, Whitney never made much money from the cotton gin. He later turned his attention to manufacturing and became a pioneer of mass production by promoting the idea of interchangeable parts in the creation of muskets for the U.S. government. This concept became a cornerstone of the American system of manufacturing and was arguably a more significant long-term contribution than the gin. In his later years, Whitney suffered from an enlarged prostate and endured significant pain. He invented several devices to help alleviate his own symptoms. Eli Whitney died in New Haven, Connecticut, on January 8, 1825, at the age of 59. He was buried in the Grove Street Cemetery in New Haven, a historic burial ground adjacent to the Yale University campus. The cemetery is notable for its grid-like layout and for being the first chartered burial ground in the United States. Whitney's grave is located within a large family plot, enclosed by a distinctive cast-iron fence. The central monument is a tall, imposing sarcophagus-style tomb made of brownstone. It is a grand and somber structure, typical of the period. His own grave is marked by a smaller, individual stone. The inscription reads, in part, "He was the inventor of the cotton gin and the father of the system of manufacturing firearms by machinery." It is a straightforward epitaph for a man whose legacy remains deeply complex, an ingenious engineer whose most famous invention brought both immense wealth and immense human suffering, forever changing the course of American history. Rudolf Diesel was a German inventor and mechanical engineer, famous for the invention of the engine that bears his name. His engine, perfected in the 1890s, used high compression to ignite its fuel, which made it much more efficient than the steam or gasoline engines of the era. The diesel engine was a revolutionary invention with vast applications, from powering ships and submarines to trains, trucks, and industrial machinery. Diesel was a brilliant engineer but a poor businessman, and he was often plagued by financial troubles and legal battles over his patent rights. He was also a man with strong social ideals, believing that his engine could empower small, independent craftsmen and help decentralize industry. By 1913, despite the technical success of his invention, he was in poor financial health and suffering from severe stress and headaches. In September of 1913, at the age of 55, Rudolf Diesel was traveling from Antwerp, Belgium to London, England, aboard the steamer SS Dresden. He was scheduled to attend a meeting in London with the British company that manufactured his engines. On the evening of September 29th, he had dinner on the ship, appeared to be in good spirits, and then retired to his cabin around 10 in the evening, leaving word to be called the next morning. He was never seen alive again. When his cabin was checked the next morning, it was empty. His bed had not been slept in, and his coat and hat were found neatly folded on the deck railing. 10 days later, the crew of a Dutch boat found a body floating in the North Sea. The body was badly decomposed, but personal items found on it, such as a pill case and an ID card, were identified by Diesel's son as belonging to his father. His death was officially ruled a suicide, with many assuming he had thrown himself overboard due to his financial problems. However, theories of industrial espionage or murder have persisted for over a century. Rudolf Diesel has no grave. His body, following common maritime practice at the time, was committed back to the sea after the personal effects were removed. The final moments of the man whose engine powered the 20th century remain a profound and unsolved mystery. Carl Benz was a German engine designer and automobile engineer whose Benz patent motor wagon from 1885 is widely considered to be the first practical gasoline-powered automobile. He was a true pioneer who developed not only a workable internal combustion engine, but also integrated it with a purpose-built chassis, creating a single, cohesive vehicle. His wife, Bertha Benz, played a crucial role in the success of his invention. In 1888, she undertook the first ever long-distance automobile journey, a 106-kilometer trip to her mother's home, performing repairs along the way and generating crucial publicity for her husband's creation. Benz's company eventually merged with that of his rival, Gottlieb Daimler, to form Daimler-Benz in 1926, the company that would go on to produce the Mercedes-Benz line of automobiles. Benz lived long enough to see his primitive three-wheeled carriage evolve into a global industry that would transform society. He retired from his company but remained on its board of directors until his death. He spent his final years as a celebrated and revered figure in his hometown of Ladenburg, Germany. Carl Benz died at his home in Ladenburg on April 4, 1929, from a bronchial inflammation. He was 84 years old. His death was noted around the world as the passing of the father of the automobile. He was buried in the main cemetery in Ladenburg, a peaceful and well-maintained burial ground. His grave is a dignified and substantial family plot, a testament to the success he eventually achieved. The grave is marked by a large, rough-hewn granite monument, a naturalistic, boulder-like stone that was popular in that era. A large, dark bronze plaque is affixed to the front of the stone. It bears the names of Carl Benz and his wife, Bertha, who died in 1944 and is buried beside him. Below their names is a simple inscription in German, Die Liebe. Sie ist der unsterbliche Gedanke im sterblichen Leben, which translates to love. It is the immortal thought in mortal life. It is a poetic and personal epitaph for the man whose mechanical creation fundamentally changed the way humanity moves. George Eastman was the American entrepreneur and inventor who founded the Eastman Kodak Company and popularized the use of roll film, helping to bring photography to the mainstream. His introduction of the first simple camera, the Kodak, in 1888, with the slogan, "You press the button, we do the rest," made photography accessible to the amateur for the first time. His innovations not only built a massive industrial empire, but also created the cultural phenomenon of the snapshot, forever changing how people document their lives. Eastman was also an extraordinary philanthropist, donating more than $100 million, an immense sum at the time, to various educational and public health institutions, including the University of Rochester and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was a lifelong bachelor who was intensely private, but also deeply committed to his community. In his late 70s, Eastman began to suffer from a debilitating degenerative disorder of the spine, likely spinal stenosis. The condition made it increasingly difficult for him to walk and caused him chronic, severe pain. He had watched his own mother suffer in a wheelchair for the last 2 years of her life and was terrified of becoming similarly incapacitated. A man who had always been meticulously in control of his life, he was determined to control the circumstances of his own death. On March 14, 1932, at his magnificent mansion in Rochester, New York, Eastman hosted a small gathering to sign an amendment to his will. After his guests left, he went to his room and wrote a short, simple note. He then took his own life with a single gunshot to the heart. He was 77 years old. The suicide note, found on his bedside table, read, "To my friends, my work is done. Why wait?" His ashes were buried at the Eastman Business Park in Rochester, which was then known as Kodak Park. His final resting place is simple and unassuming. A square granite marker, flush with the ground, lies in a quiet, grassy area. It is engraved with his name, dates, and the poignant last words from his note, "My work is done." It is a characteristically direct and pragmatic final statement from a man who meticulously organized both his life and his departure from it. Elias Howe Jr. was an American inventor who pioneered the development of the lock-stitch sewing machine. While he was not the first to conceive of a mechanical sewing device, his design, patented in 1846, contained the 3 essential features common to most modern machines: a needle with the eye at the point, a shuttle operating beneath the cloth to form a lock stitch, and an automatic feed. His path to success was a long and arduous struggle. He failed to market his invention in America and went to England, where he was swindled by a business partner. He returned to the United States years later, impoverished and in poor health, only to find that other entrepreneurs, most notably Isaac Singer, had begun manufacturing sewing machines using his patented lock-stitch mechanism. This led to a massive and protracted legal battle. In 1854, the courts finally ruled in Howe's favor, upholding his patent rights and ordering his competitors to pay him substantial royalties on every machine they sold. The verdict made Elias Howe an incredibly wealthy man. During the Civil War, he served as a private in the Union Army, and he later founded a sewing machine company of his own in Bridgeport, Connecticut. However, his health, which had been poor for years due to the hardships he endured, never fully recovered. He suffered from a severe stomach ailment and kidney problems. Elias Howe died in Brooklyn, New York on October 3, 1867, at the relatively young age of 48. He was buried in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York, in a plot not far from another great inventor, Samuel Morse. His final resting place is one of the most magnificent and elaborate monuments in the entire cemetery. The massive granite monument stands on a prominent circular plot. At its base is a large, ornate sarcophagus where Howe is interred. Rising above it is a tall, decorative pedestal topped with a life-sized marble statue of Howe himself, depicted as a classical Roman figure. The entire monument is intricately carved with reliefs depicting scenes from his life and work. It is a grand and opulent tribute, a testament to the immense fortune he finally acquired after years of struggle and perseverance. Cyrus Hall McCormick was an American inventor and industrialist who founded the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company, which later became part of International Harvester. He is credited with the invention of the first commercially successful mechanical reaper, a horse-drawn machine that automated the process of harvesting grain. While his father had worked on a similar device for years, it was Cyrus who perfected and patented it in 1834. The reaper was a transformative invention for American agriculture, allowing farmers to cultivate much larger plots of land with far less labor. It played a significant role in the expansion of the American West and helped turn the United States into the breadbasket of the world. McCormick was a brilliant and aggressive businessman who pioneered modern marketing techniques, such as public demonstrations, guarantees, and installment buying to dominate the industry. He moved his operations to Chicago in the 1840s, to be closer to the vast grain fields of the Midwest. He became one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Chicago, a figure known for his staunch Presbyterian faith and his pro-slavery political views. He lived to the age of 75, remaining active in his business and philanthropic endeavors until the end. Cyrus McCormick died at his home in Chicago on May 13, 1884, after a long illness. His body was transported by a special train for burial in Virginia, the state of his birth. He was buried in the cemetery of the Old Stone Church in Fort Defiance, a historic Presbyterian church in the Shenandoah Valley. His grave is located in a prominent family plot, enclosed by an iron fence. The central monument is a tall, elegant gray granite obelisk, a classic Victorian grave marker. His own grave, alongside that of his wife, is marked by a simpler, upright headstone bearing his name, dates, and an inscription from the Bible, reflecting his deep religious convictions. It is a dignified and traditional resting place for the man whose invention revolutionized farming and helped feed a growing nation. Frank Hornby was an English inventor, businessman, and politician who created 3 of the most popular and enduring lines of toys in the 20th century. A bookkeeper with no formal engineering training, he was a creative genius when it came to model making. His first invention, patented in 1901, was a model construction toy called Mechanics Made Easy, which was later renamed Meccano. This system of reusable metal strips, plates, wheels, and gears allowed children to build an endless variety of models and became a global phenomenon. Building on this success, he later introduced Hornby model railways in the 1920s, which set the standard for toy trains, and dinky toys in the 1930s, which pioneered the market for die-cast miniature cars. His inventions were more than just toys. They were educational tools that introduced a generation of children to the principles of mechanics and engineering. Hornby became a very wealthy man and the head of a massive toy empire based in Liverpool. He even served a term as a member of parliament for his local constituency. He remained involved with his company until his death. On September 21, 1936, Frank Hornby died at his home in Maghull, near Liverpool, at the age of 73, following a long illness. His funeral was a major event in Liverpool, a city where his factories had employed thousands of people. He was buried in the churchyard of St. Andrew's Church, a parish church in Maghull, Lancashire. His grave is a place of considerable pilgrimage for enthusiasts of his toys. The grave itself is a large and stately monument, reflecting his status as a titan of industry. It is a substantial granite tomb, designed in a classical style with columns and a heavy ledger stone on top. The family name Hornby is carved in large letters on the front. An inscription on the top slab lists his name, dates, and those of his wife and sons who are buried with him. It is a handsome and solid monument, a fitting final tribute to the man whose imaginative creations fired the curiosity and brought joy to millions of children around the world.